We're here with another interview, and really thankful that David Price has joined us for this series. David is located at the moment in the UK, near his hometown of Leeds. I'm questioning him, interviewing him from where I live in Sydney. So again, it's an amazing opportunity that even during a pandemic crisis that we're going through at the moment, that we can still connect in this way. So it's great to have you, David. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Just a point of correction, because I'll never live it down. My hometown's further north. It's in a place called Jarrow in the northeast. But my adopted town was Leeds.
Okay.
Now I'm in the beautiful Yorkshire Dales. If you could see the view I've got here, it's spectacular. So there's worse places to be locked down in.
Going to, okay. And then I understand it's very important to correct those things, especially with English countryside culture.
Indeed.
Going through. Now, okay, David, you've had a lot of experience writing about, talking about, and training people to think about the future, the education directions, what's been happening and where we need to go, where we might go, and how we can develop people for that. If we had to take an umbrella look at the moment of what's actually going on with a sudden rush or thrust into remote learning, distance learning, what do you see as the biggest challenge at the moment?
Well, I think the first thing is that we should acknowledge what an incredible job teachers have done over the past month. You know, to switch from one mode of delivery to another overnight has been phenomenal. There's even more content now than we ever thought we needed, I guess. But that we can work through all of that. But my concern is that, understandably, people have equated the shift to online learning to online schooling. We've just taken all the same structures and divisions that we had, and then stuck a Zoom camera on it, which is to be completely expected. This is not going to go away anytime soon. So there'll be an evolution of all of this, but I think we've got to look at the bigger picture now, and particularly I think we've got to focus upon what does it mean, not just for methods of delivery, but for the whole school system, in terms of where are we going to be at the end of this as a planet, and where do we want to be?
Yeah, I'm aware that a number of schools are starting to struggle because I guess they simply haven't had the time to think through where are they going with this. They've just launched into, as you said, into replicating the school that they were running into as close as possible timetable into there. What would you want to say to people who are stuck in that spot at the moment, who are a little bit hesitant to jump out of that mode into something different or more creative, who are worried about the kids' examinations and their results and assessments? What confidence could you give them that there's a direction that they should think about?
Well, I think the first thing is let's not be too hard on ourselves. This will be over, and at the end of it, even if a child did nothing for a year, then their lives are not going to be ruined. Their academic career will probably go on just the same, and they'll probably end up in the same place when they finish school or college. So let's try and relax a little bit. Let's also recognize that we've been saying this for a long time, that parents are the primary educators, but they really are now. And let's think about how we involve parents and support parents, because that, it seems to me, is the bit that when this is all over, we could have changed fundamentally. And I think, once you get past the novelty that parents have had in that first week or so, you then get, the tweets that are saying teachers should be paid £1 million a week, because I didn't realize it was so hard. But now they're at that point where I think they're saying this doesn't seem to work very well for me or my child. It's not working for the family and the rhythm of our day. So I would say let's work with the circadian rhythm of the family, and let's not worry too much about that. And let's look at the learning that is around us. we've had a remarkable example. It's a school that Stephen, very well, Matthew Moss High School in Rochdale. Last week, because we still have some kids who are going to school, they're either, from
Yeah.
underprivileged families or they're children of key workers. And so the kids that are at Matthew Moss had come across online designs for face shields for medical staff. And they said, why don't we make some of these? Because they're in tremendously short supply. And so that's what they did. They didn't say, well, we can't do that because it's not physics until Tuesday. So they started making these masks, and they started taking them around GP surgeries all around Greater Manchester. The learning that is in that is incredible, and they will remember that for the rest of their lives. So I firmly believe that even in the worst grip of this pandemic, which it seems that we're just entering into that really difficult phase now, there is an incredible amount of learning. And I think we've got to be honest with kids in terms of what that means for the world. So I would love to see kids talking to their parents and to teachers about how is this going to affect the world economically? What are we what does this mean in terms of globalization? If we've now got countries that are being forced to cooperate that were at each other's throats, 3-4 months ago, what does that mean? And what will that mean for these kids' futures? Because if we simply go back to face-to-face schooling and 10 subjects divided into 1-hour chunks, I think we'll have missed a huge opportunity. But more significantly, we will not have taken the opportunity that presents itself to reimagine what the world could be like.
All right, so let's put a hypothetical. Let's just say that you finished up as the Minister for Education right now, in the middle of the problem. What would be some immediate things that you would want to see done in order to free up the learning for kids across the UK, say? And then we might have a look afterwards. So the question now is about what would you want to see happening immediately in order to help redirect people onto the right path?
Well, I think instead of people churning out lectures online, which is, I understand why they're doing that, and simply giving the kids more content, because pretty soon our kids are going to be fed up with simply sitting down watching their teacher give a lecture, or filling in an online worksheet as opposed to a paper worksheet. I think if we're going to develop any kind of content, let's develop a set of projects that could be done in the home, which could tackle some of these issues. Let's look at how kids could be doing some purposeful learning, which takes the circumstances that we're in, doesn't run away from them, but acknowledges that kids need, more than ever now, will need a sense of agency. So this knowledge-rich curriculum that we've been talking about, fine, of course we need disciplinary learning, and thank God one of the things which has come out now in the UK is that we've realized that it is useful to listen to experts, and suddenly the role of expertise is being elevated again, which is great. But that in itself is of limited value. And I find it fascinating that what's going on right now is that we're seeing outside of school, in the response to this pandemic, we are seeing our pillars of institutions, governments, the ways that we typically organize society are unable to react at speed and at scale to the problems that we've got. Whereas what we're seeing are, Formula One car manufacturers developing ventilators in a week. We're seeing people playing that game Folded online, hundreds of thousands of people who are, it's a video simulation, but it experiments with proteins folding to predict the way the coronavirus might mutate. And anyone can play that, kids or people in their 80s and 90s. We're seeing the the um, the developments in the research community, which it was yesterday. It was a parallel to the Dunkirk evacuation, and a professor said it's time for the little boats now. We've had the big boats, and they're not doing it. They're not getting us to the point that we need to be at. So let's get all the little boats out. And he was referring specifically to testing. That we have to be testing in every laboratory space that we can find. But it's writ large across this whole pandemic. And for me, the most thrilling part of this is to see the return to the commons. You know, we've seen this absolute explosion all around the world of ingenuity. There's an 8-year-old child in America who set up a website to allow kids to engage in virtual play. It's called We Pals, and she set it up herself. And this is happening everywhere. There's 1,000 mutual aid groups on Facebook right now around the country, and it's people looking after their local community. I find it hugely ironic that some of our most vulnerable people now who've been locked down in their houses are saying that they've never felt more connected to their neighbors and to the community because people are starting to look after one another. That, it seems to me, has to give us a lesson about the direction of learning. And in the UK, we've been particularly lacking in recognition, I think, for what Americans call service-based learning. And I think if nothing else comes of this, we are going to have a generation of kids who are going to be saying, when they go back to school, they will quite rightly be saying, what is this doing for my community? What's this going to do for my family? What's this learning going to do for my region? And it's absolutely right that they should be asking those questions.
Yeah. Okay, let's sidetrack for a second and say, focus on the teachers. So there's a teacher who's been thrown into this remote learning, homeschooling, pseudo type world, and they wanted to self-develop their skills. What's a strategy that you think a person who has no longer got access to going to their normal conferences, and maybe they'll find something in the virtual world, but what do you think a person can best do to prepare themselves now to shift their practice to match the environment?
I think that is such a difficult but valuable question to ask, because if I were in their shoes, I would be struggling, and I think they are. I think this is why we're seeing a lot of teachers are saying, "Well, we tried that online learning stuff and it didn't work, so can't wait to get back to school." However, it, like I said, this is going to be around for a while, so it seems to me if you are not someone who has embraced this, and this has got nothing to do with age. You and I, Stephen, have been around a while, and yet we've managed to make ourselves technologically savvy enough to be able to use these tools. I I, I think there's a huge support community out there. There are other teachers online, but you have to engage with it. You have to get in there, and we've all been in that point with technology where we say, okay, you've just got to, at some point, you have to take a deep breath and jump in the water, and someone will help you. And I've always found that to be the case. So I think there's a number of levels. There is the simple technical tasks of how do I get across what the learning that I want my students to have through this box that sits on my table. But beyond that, I think there's also how do I change what I'm doing so that it can engage the students in ways that, frankly, if the kid was bored doing maths via worksheets in the classroom, they're not going to be any less bored by doing it online. It's going to be the same experience. I think there are some interesting examples within the arts. You know, my background's music, and people have been using online technologies in music for a long time. And I think it's fascinating to see the global musical response to this pandemic. And so I think in some disciplines, people are more comfortable than in others. We're all going to have to, we're going to have to get our heads around this. And I think if you're a teacher who is afraid of actually, making mistakes and recognizing that when it comes to this technology, the students you are teaching can teach you. And so don't try to be the expert. Recognize that you can learn from other professionals, but you can also learn from your students and use your families.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's all great advice. If you were in charge of a school community or a system, and you were trying to find some way of encouraging people to do that development, and you can't actually meet with them again, are there any strategies you think there that school leaders should be thinking through?
Again, I think we're kind of seeing this ingenuity which is happening outside of school. So let's learn from that. So, as an example, one of the case studies in my next book is a small craft brewery in Scotland called Brewdog, and they have lost overnight 70% of their revenue. They were about to close down, and then they said, "Well, let's make some hand sanitizer." So they started doing that. They said, "We've got delivery vans. Why don't we deliver free meals for the elderly and the vulnerable?" And then they said, hold on, a pub's just a room where people get together. So let's have virtual pubs. So they've now got 102 virtual pubs around the country, and they have quiz nights, they have beer tastings, they have comedy, they have music, and at the last count there were over 100,000 people taking part in these pub nights. Similarly, my family on tonight, yeah, we're doing a virtual dinner. We're all cooking the same thing, and we're going to be connected through Zoom. So if we're doing that socially, why wouldn't we want to do that in terms of the educational experience? Now, this gets to another question, which is, in terms of the schools that already have strong community links and strong links with their families, that isn't that significant a problem. You know High Tech High very well, and they've also always had this thing where their advisors have a dinner in each family of the advisory student that they're looking after. Once a year, they go around to that parent's house and they sit down and have dinner. So it isn't that big a stretch, then it seems to me, for those teachers to say, let's have a Zoom family get together across our kids, and let's just chat about how the kids are doing and what we think they should be and how we can work this out together. I think the schools that have not developed those strong family links, it's going to be a bigger challenge. But hey, maybe this is the time to start building them. But if we look to how outside of school people are finding these incredibly inventive solutions to get around the restrictions, then I think all we've got to do is to say, how can that work in an educational context?
Okay, so that as we sort of head towards the end here, let's think about schools who've got employees on their list whose jobs are really redundant. Perhaps they're in the admin, or they're working in the grounds, or there's something else. What new roles would you repurpose for them that you think would be really, really helpful in this new world?
Wow, that's a question I hadn't even thought about. But I do think that, well, it's going to vary from location to location. We in the UK, because our government decided that they were going to basically furlough workers and pay 80% of their salary. Are they doing that in Australia?
Yeah, they are. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, how much is all this going to cost at the end of the day? But thankfully that they did. But actually, it's had in some ways, it's had a counterproductive effect, because uh, people are having to turn down requests for paid work, because it will infringe upon those furlough requirements. But I think there are all sorts of opportunities which we're seeing. Just this morning, one of our local primary schools, Parklands School in Leeds, It's an amazing school. It's in one of the most deprived neighborhoods in the country, but it has a principal of a school, Chris Dyson, who has always built up phenomenal links with local supermarkets, and they have taken it upon themselves as a school to say, at this time, we may be not able to run classes, but we are here to support the community. So they're arranging meals for the vulnerable, and everyone in the school is pitching in to help that. And I think that the benefits and the dividends that we'll get from this. George Monbiot was writing in The Guardian the other day, and he said, "Isn't it funny that we talked about how we'd all turn into flesh-eating zombies when the apocalypse happened? Who knew that we'd actually start caring for each other?" And I do think that has been one of the great benefits of that. I just hope that when it's all over, we don't go back to our life as it was. But to answer your question, yeah, I think the role of schools now in terms of their local communities, it has never been greater. And at the end of all of this, you know that Valerie Hannon and myself and a few other people have been talking for a while about this notion of a learning ecosystem where schools just part of a much bigger network, that's responsible for the development of that child, and 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 that's what we're seeing now. And it's taken a pandemic to do that, but I think we can't go back to the schools that are locked behind these big fences anymore. We can't be so afraid of the world as we used to be, because it turned out that actually there were some good people out there, and schools like Parklands who are saying our responsibility is to you as a community, not just your kids. Um, I'd love to see schools as revivers of community when this is all over.
Okay, so last question here. Little steps. A person's listened to everything you've said, and then perhaps listened to some of the other interviews, and they don't know what do they do tomorrow morning when they wake up and they go to turn their laptop on for their online teaching. What's the first little step you would say to anyone that they should take?
Talk to your students. If you're not sure whether this is working, ask your students. If you're struggling with the technology, get them to take some responsibility for it. Get them to peer teach. Get them so that this is no longer all about you, and the pressure isn't just upon you. Like I said at the start, I think the way teachers have responded has been phenomenal, and we need to remember that. The, more than anyone, it seems to me, apart from health workers, it seems to me that they've borne the brunt of this. And we did our applause for teachers last night around the country, which was great to see. But I think if you're feeling like it's struggling, if the novelty is starting to wear off, then just have an honest conversation with your students. What would you like them to do? Because at the end of the day, student directed learning is going to be more relevant to them anyway. They're probably going to remember more if they've been part of that conversation about what they wanted to learn, which is no different to how it should have been in the face-to-face world, of course. But it's simply, here's an opportunity now where not only can you no longer pretend to be the expert, but you shouldn't be the expert, because like the cliche says, we're all in this together.
Yep, absolutely. Well, thank you, David. I think you've given lots of encouragement there for people to think through, and I've certainly enjoyed your thoughts and your answers. So we really appreciate your contribution to this series. Thank you.
It's been great chatting with you, Stephen. It seems a whole world away when we were having lunch at Circular Quay, but it's only a few weeks ago. It's how the world has changed. You look after yourself.
Thank you.